Right, it's here at long last, everyone, from the guy that brought you Keeper Punt, the entire Celtic first team squad analysed. We've got the sequel, Keeper Punt, the entire Celtic first team squad analysed. Yeah, I'm nothing if not consistent. I was looking back at the original video we did a year ago, and just on a separate point before I get on to today's actual video, I'm not usually one for kind of pausing and taking a look back at what the channel was a year ago, but we have improved a fair bit. I mean, this time last year I had AirPods in when I was doing these things. I didn't have the green screen behind me. We had that daft music. God, remember that daft music? We're all having a laugh. Not really. Yeah, I don't know how so many of you put up with the channel for so long, but anyway, you've probably subscribed in that time. If you've not yet, now's your time to do it. That's all I'm going to say, because there is a hell of a lot to get through on this video. We've got every single Celtic player who's played at least 1 minute for the club this season. Sorry, Luca Cono. We're excluding players who've obviously left the club, like Jeremy Frimpong. I've included the loan players, see if we want them back or not. Quite simply, I'm going to go through them all, give a wee opinion on their season, and see whether I think they should be at the club next season or not. Very simple, let's get on with it. Should say, by the way, these are in the order of the alphabet in terms of their surnames. Probably one of the few players you can't really accuse of throwing in the towel in recent weeks. He looks like he's always given his all. He is the best defender at the club. He's probably one of the best players at the club. I wouldn't punt him necessarily, of course. I'd rather he was there next season. Whether he will be or not, I kind of doubt. I think after 5 years at the club, 3 or 4 of them in the first team, I think he'll probably look at this summer as being his time to move on with a new manager coming in and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is kind of a weird one. I wouldn't punt him, but do I think he'll be at the club next season? Sadly not. Really Jekyll and Hyde start to his Celtic career. He scored 5 goals in his first 9 appearances for the club, and a lot of them were off the bench as well. However, since that goal against Hibs back in October, I think, he's netted 1 goal in his last 18 appearances for Celtic. Now, again, a lot of those have been off the bench, but that simply is not good enough for a guy we've shelled out £5 million for. A lot of people turning on him, saying that he's finished and saying that we should sell him in the summer. Maybe I'm just a nice person, but I think that Albion Ajeti deserves another chance under a new manager. Hopefully a change in manager, a change in system perhaps, a change in feeling around the club will get the best out of him next season. But what I will say, along with saying that I'm keeping him, is that he has to get off to a good start next season, because the jury is still out on him and they're about to return a guilty verdict if he doesn't get off to a good start at the start of the next campaign. I can see the value in having him around. I think I said the exact same in last year's video. So I'm going to go keep for Scott Bain, but with the rather large stipulation that he can't be our first choice next season. Under no circumstances can he be starting those Champions League qualifiers. I really am too nice for this business, but I'm going to go with keep for Barkas as well. Quite simply, I'd like to see him under a new manager that doesn't throw him under the bus at every single opportunity. I would like to see him given a proper opportunity in the team, but what I will say is that it's a huge decision for the new manager to come in. Does he stick with Barkas, who's clearly struggled this season, or does he bring in his own man? I think that's one of the most interesting things to keep your eyes on this summer. So I'm going to go keep for Barkas, but I actually wouldn't be massively against selling him if it meant we could recoup some sort of the £5 million fee. He certainly hasn't been a success this season. Another on the fence keep for me. Quite similar to Scott Bain, I think he has a role in the squad. I think with so much turnover expected this year, new manager, new chief executive, new technical director, probably a dozen players leaving the club. I think we need some sort of consistency at the club, and Nir Bitton is clearly a guy who knows what Celtic are all about, and he knows the standards, he knows the league, all of that kind of stuff that probably doesn't matter that much, but I'd like to keep him around for that very fact. But again, like Scott Bain, he cannot be starting Champions League qualifiers at centre-back. In fact, he can't be starting any big games at centre-back. He has to be a squad player next season. If that's his role and he's happy with that and everyone else is happy with that, then I'm up for keeping him around. We have a punt, everyone. Balling goalie. I'm afraid no matter what anyone says, you cannot be forgiven for what you did. I noticed he was in Dubai By the way, did you see that? I mean, Christ almighty, what a guy. This is a proper tough one. In fact, so tough that I was even thinking of doing a full video chatting about the Scott Brown debate. He is out of contract in the summer. Based on absolutely nothing at all, I just get the impression that the club and Scott Brown will want to stick around next season. I think he'll want to go out on a high and hope that he can win the league and leave on the high. And to be honest, I don't begrudge him that. I think he certainly has a role at the club, but he cannot be starting games, and he can't even be like our captain, meaning that he'll start big games next season. I think Callum McGregor has to take the role of captain next season. Now, whether there can be a club captain in Scott Brown and a playing captain in Callum McGregor, that could be something to go for. Maybe Scott Brown could take on the role of Colo Touré in the Invincible season, being a player coach type thing with the emphasis on the latter. I think it'd be good to have Scott Brown kicking around for similar reasons to Nir Bitton, but I think he's held us back this season, and the reliance on him and the need to play him in big games has held us back in those big matches, especially in Europe. Again, that can't be allowed to continue next season, but I'm going to go for another on-the-fence keep. Sadly, I don't think it's worked for Ryan Christie. I've spoken at length on the channel about how he frustrates the life out of me. He's a really talented player, but he just never seems to take his time in a match. Everything is just kick and rush. He scored 5 goals this season at the time of recording, which is a paltry total. And I just really hope that some club in England, a Burnley or a Southampton, who have signed so many players from us in the past, will take a punt on Ryan Christie, sign him for, I don't know, 7 or 8 million, something like that. If we could get that for him, sell him, I'd be absolutely delighted. Everyone can move on. He can get his move to the Premier League after the Euros, and we won't have to watch him taking speculative shots from 30, 40 yards every match. Well, it very much seems like he's going to be leaving the club, which is just a bit of a shame. Yeah, his loan spell has just been a complete and utter disaster for both him and the club. I think people forget that Shane Duffy would have wanted to succeed at Celtic as well, so we just need to write this one off. Thankfully, he's not ours. We don't have to worry about shifting him in the summer. We just have to not sign him, basically. And I certainly think I'd be very surprised if he did end up playing for us next season, but stranger things have probably happened somewhere. Great player, probably the best striker we've had at the club in a decade and a half. He's still the top scorer in the league. He will finish the top scorer in the league. He's still scored a lot of big goals for us this season, but he quite clearly hasn't been the player we've seen in recent seasons. Quite simply, his heart isn't quite in it. And to be honest, the way this season's unfolded, I don't massively blame him for that. I think it's right for all parties that we sell him this summer. It's the final chance for us to sell him and get some sort of large fee. Where he will go, I don't know, but he'll get a massive handshake, a round of applause, probably some tears as well, and a good luck for the future. A terrific striker, but I think it's time for Celtic and Odsonne Edouard to part company this summer. Jury out again on Mohamed Elyounoussi based on how he's played this season. I think if he's available for between 5 and 7 million this summer from Southampton, I would sign him permanently. I think he could be great under a proper manager who would develop him. I think he's the kind of player who would have benefited massively playing under Brendan Rodgers. So if he's there, available, and he wants to come to us for that price, I'd be up for signing him. He's clearly a good player, but equally, I wouldn't blame him for never wanting to hear Celtic's name again after the way this season has unfolded. He's talented, he's a creator, he's a goal scorer, he's got a proven goal scoring track record, he's got a track record of winning trophies with Celtic, he's direct, he's pacey. Yeah, it's fair to say I'm for keeping James Forrest. Every time you chat about Leigh Griffiths, you always hear people say, oh, but he scores big goals. And to a certain extent, that's true. But he's only scored 6 goals in total this season. And for Leigh Griffiths, that is nowhere near good enough. He's been a great player for us over the years, and he's been here for a long time, basically through the whole 9-in-a-row run. But for me, he's one of the players who has to be moved on this summer. His attitude this season, not being fit, not turning up, that kind of stuff, has summed up the regression at Celtic Park as a whole, and for that reason I think with a new manager coming in, he has to be one of the players first to leave in the big clear out. This is a keep, but it is interesting to ponder where Conor Hazard's going to end up next season. Does he go back to being third choice if we sign a new goalkeeper, or we restore Barkas's confidence and ability? Does he go out on loan again? Seems like a bit of a backward step from going out on loan, given that he's played a few games for the first team this season. He signed a new contract lately, so he's clearly in our long-term plans, but yeah, it's an interesting one to keep an eye out for. The difficulty with Ewan Henderson is that probably our best player, David Turnbull, plays in his exact position. So it's going to be hard for him to get opportunities of game time next season. We've only really seen him one game, I think, this season when he came on as an early sub in the match against Lille that everyone loves, probably our high point of the season. He was really good that night, but it's almost 3 years now since Ewan Henderson made his breakthrough into the Celtic first team under Brendan Rodgers, and he's really not kicked on from that at all. Now, maybe that's his fault, maybe it's the club's fault for not giving him game time, but I feel like next season's a huge one for him. Now, is he going to get opportunities at Celtic? Not so sure. Should we loan him out to another club? It hasn't exactly worked out for him in the past. He spent time at Ross County and it didn't work out. So it's a really interesting one to see what Celtic do with Ewan Henderson this summer. Another player whose career has stalled a bit in recent years. I know he's had injury troubles, and I know he would probably have benefited more under a manager like Brendan Rodgers, where he seemed to be really coming on to a game, and he stagnated under Neil Lennon. I would like to see us put a bit of faith in Mikey Johnson next season. Why not start the season with him as our left winger? I know that may be a risk, but I think he's shown he's talented enough that if we put the faith in him and give him a run of games and not just sub-appearances, he could go on to be a valuable player for us. So he's one of the players I want to see in the Celtic first team next year, and obviously for that to happen, we need to keep him. I love this guy. I know his injury troubles have been a real frustration for everyone, including me, but I would keep him. I'm yet to really see anything from this guy that suggests we should try and sign him permanently, and anything that suggests this spell at Celtic will be anything more than a loan stint. So I think we could do a lot better for probably a lot less money when we start from scratch and a right back. Trying to replace Jeremy Frimpong is going to be quite a tough ask. Not sure Jonjoe Kenny is the answer. Bit of a tough one. I really want this guy to succeed, and he's not really been given the opportunities at Celtic yet, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that he's just not very good, that he's a real raw player that maybe just isn't that good. So I think next year's a huge season. This time next year he has to have broken into the Celtic first team, or his Celtic career will be over. I would keep him for now, but next year really is his huge season at the club. Loved this guy at the start. Don't know what has happened to him. He's probably suffered from the same thing that Jeremy Toljan did, being a lone player, not really committed to a team that was struggling. And yeah, I quite simply don't want to see him next season. I'm kind of a bit fed up of him now, which is a bit of a shame. As I said earlier, this guy has to be our leader next season. It's been building up that way for years. It has to happen. He has to be the leader of the new Celtic. There's been some people saying that he's going to be tempted by a move down south. I think he's 28 or 29. I personally don't see that. I think he knows he's going to be the future Celtic captain, and a bit like Scott Brown, he realises what could be on offer for him the rest of his career, winning trophies, playing in Europe, earning a decent wage as well. Not quite what he'd earned down south, but still a very healthy wage, not to be sniffed at. I know he's been poor this season, but this is still a guy we've got to build a team around next season. Of course it's a keep for Callum McGregor. Yeah, quite simply, Olivier Ntcham's time is up. The support don't have much time for him anymore. Even if it doesn't work out for him at Marseille, which looks increasingly likely, we need to find another destination for him in the summer. Don't really know, to be honest. Can't say I'd be bothered either way. No offence. I feel Anthony Ralston has to leave the club for his own good as much as Celtic's. He has to go and forge a career for himself and not just be a player who maybe gets 2 or 3 games at Celtic in a season. He just simply isn't good enough for Celtic. That's nothing against him. I think he can still go on and have a good career at probably a top flight club in Scotland or even down south, do what Jack Aitchison is doing. But this sticking around at Celtic hasn't been good enough. And again, that's not a go at Anthony Ralston. It's a go at Celtic. I don't know why he's still around when he quite clearly isn't ever going to be a first team player. If that's the case, why is he around? What's the point? Another one of the players who was great for us back in 2016, 2017, no longer is. I'll always have positive memories of some of the amazing moments Tom Rogic has given me. He remains probably the only Celtic player to have made me cry at a game. Although I feel like crying a bit now when I watch him because he's just fallen so far from the player we used to love. The tactics we play no longer fit him. He's just simply not the player he was. He kind of ambles around, he strolls about the park, and it's frustrating to watch. I just want us to sell him, to punt him this summer in the nicest possible way before he ruins any of the good memories we have of them, because the good memories I have of Tom Rogic really do outweigh the bad ones at the moment. But you know, if he sticks around for another year, that may not be the case. I really think this guy could be a good player for us, could be a future first team player for us if we make him a first team player and stop playing Scott Brown. The time has come. Just as McGregor should take over the captaincy, Sorrell should take over Brown's midfield enforcer, defensive midfielder role. It has to happen now. I really hope a manager comes in and takes a liking to Sorrell, because I think he could be a really good player for us if he's given consistent game time. That simply hasn't happened up until now. Another player I would like to keep around. I think he's shown promise this year. This season has certainly been better than previous season, which is strange because the team's been struggling more than last season. I think, again, with a good manager, Greg Taylor could go on to be a good Celtic player, but I think we need to sign another left back as well to give him some competition, because I don't feel he's really had that this season, other than Laxalt for a couple of months before he went off the boil. One of the few players to come out of this season with any sort of credit. You know how good David Turnbull is. He's an absolute class act. He's a player that could be a star for Celtic for the next 2 or 3 seasons if we can keep hold of him for that long. Obviously, he has to be a keep this summer. We have to build the team around him. He's one of the few players that I look at and I'm actually excited about, and that's quite sad to say about the Celtic squad this season, but Turnbull has definitely been a bright spark in an otherwise horror season. Definitely a much better option than someone like Nir Bitton, Stephen Welsh. Will he get game time next season? I kind of feel like he might start the season as a first choice centre back. The reason I say that is Christopher Ajer will probably leave the club. Shane Duffy hopefully won't be at the club. Christopher Julian will probably still be injured. So we're going to have to sign a few centre backs if Welsh isn't going to be a first choice starter. He's certainly proven himself to be good enough domestically. Whether he can do it in Europe, we don't really know yet, but he is still young. He still can come onto a game. 100% keep. I don't see the point in selling him before he's reached any sort of value.